Hi. This was supposed to be an unexpectedly positive review of Forza Motorsport, and I'm mostly going to make the video as I had intended until about a day before writing this. But before I get started, please, for the love of God, don't buy this game. I'll get into why later, but I'm out $100 with nothing to show for it because of this game, so seriously, no matter how many positive things I'm about to tell you, do not buy Forza Motorsport. Sound good? Great. Let's take a little look at what this video would have been in the parallel universe where Forza didn't cheat me out of $100 of my hard-earned YouTube money. Originally, I wasn't ever going to get to play Forza Motorsport. I hate subscription services, so I would never pay for Game Pass, and $70 to $100 is just way too much money to take a risk with, especially seeing as I decided I wouldn't buy another Forza after Horizon 4. However, thanks to a donation of one free week of Game Pass from fellow YouTube creator Ruben, here I am, having not learned from the absolute torrent of hatred and vitriol directed at me in the comments of my last game review. Let's take a look at the newest game in the Forza Motorsport franchise. Motorsport's introduction begins at Maple Valley, one of a handful of fictional tracks in the game, and predictably enough, I'll be driving one of the two cover cars, the Corvette E-Ray. My first impressions? It's fine. I haven't driven a game on a controller in the better part of a year at this point, other than a very brief part of my The Crew Motorfest review, so my initial impression of the handling simply doesn't exist. I don't have a baseline anymore. We get a taste of the lower difficulty AI's corner phobia, and also slightly crash into one of the AI cars, because, as the comments in my last review were all too happy to point out, I can't drive. I have a bit of a problem with the field of view. I'll increase it later, but it's still not enough to see the mirrors in some cars, which is kind of a problem for racing, especially when the proximity marker UI is disabled by default. This does not help my incompetent driving. The next track, also fictional, sees me behind the wheel, or possibly on top of it, judging by this FOV, of a Cadillac V-Series R, a race car that, I'll be honest, I don't remember any of the handling characteristics of. This part of the footage was recorded 2 weeks ago, give me a break. It's notable, however, that between races I've swapped from the controller to my Logitech G29 wheel, the brand of which will become important later. I'd heard pretty bad things about the force feedback, and indeed, it isn't great. It feels really stiff and muddy, and it's difficult to get a feel for the car. As it turns out, this isn't entirely Forza's fault, but we'll come back to that. This is a multi-class race, so most of the AI are in slower cars, and I get held up behind a BMW for a little while. Eventually, I get past it, and quite a few other cars before the end of the race. Okay, we've made it to the main menu. This is, however, not the end of the tutorial. I choose a racing suit, going with what semi-accidentally has become my channel color scheme, and then a car. My choices are a Civic, a Subaru, and a Mustang. The Civic's ugly, the Subaru is apparently the fastest because Forza isn't balanced, and so I go with the Mustang. Given my driving skills and the large crowds that might gather at a racetrack, I think this is a natural pairing of car to driver. The game walks me through a bunch of settings, and I'd like to make a quick little note here. One of the many apparently controversial things in my review of The Crew Motorfest is that I did not like the constant chatter from the NPCs in that game. While it does annoy me just a little here too, what really helps is that once this tutorial's over, we're pretty much done with that. Aside from an occasional time penalty is about 4 seconds or whatever, the game's going to be done with narration. The rest of the tutorial is essentially just a demonstration of the game's career mode with a bit more hand-holding. I drive some practice laps in the Mustang to hit a target time, and then there's a race around the same circuit, which is incidentally yet another fictional one. Grand Oak will eventually become one of my favorite tracks in the game, but for now, with zero track knowledge, it's just another racetrack to me. As I quickly discover, it's really difficult to race cleanly in interior view with no position markers. I hope you like this collision sound. You'll be hearing it a lot. That said, despite the relative incompetence of the AI, even compared to, me, the racing's enjoyable enough. This is most likely the novelty. I don't often get the chance to race wheel to wheel in a game. The only car game I still play with actual racing in it is Assetto Corsa, and due to a shortage of friends and a lack of interest in public lobbies, I'm stuck with the AI, who are all far more consistent in that game than I am. So, starved of anything resembling actual racing, no matter how terrible Forza's AI are, I'm kind of enjoying myself. Anyway, the race ends with me just narrowly missing out on a 5th place finish, and because this is still part of the tutorial, the narrator guides me through the upgrade system. We'll talk about this more later because I have some quite strong opinions about Forza Motorsport's new upgrade system, but for now I'm forced to auto-upgrade the car and we move on to the next race. Our first real-life track of the video is the Mugello Club Circuit, and this event follows the same formula as the one at Grand Oak. Practice, then race. This is the same for all career events. I finished this race in 2nd, barely, and so it's back to the performance menu between races, where I'm now allowed to do upgrades manually. I quickly find myself limited by car points, but as I said, let's leave that discussion for the future. Right now, we're headed to Kyalami, a track I've never heard of that has become another of my favorites in the game. It's really technical, which clearly isn't the Mustang's cup of tea, and it's got plenty of elevation changes, which I normally don't love for racing since it makes it kind of hard to see some of the corners, but for whatever reason I really like driving here. It's a nice track. I crossed the line in 4th, and after being given a car as a loyalty reward, presumably since I played Horizon 4, I take that car for a spin. I also demonstrate the penalty system in the process. I've heard mixed opinions on this penalty system, but for what it's worth, in my own single-player-only experience, it's decent. Maybe a little too lenient, but I don't think I've ever gotten a penalty for something that wasn't my fault. Your mileage may vary, especially if you're doing a lot of multiplayer. With my arms sore from an hour and 20 minutes of wheel use, seriously, why does this game's force feedback hurt my shoulders so much? I end my first session. When I return, I'm armed with some random internet person's force feedback settings, which have absolutely no effect whatsoever. It's still stiff, vague, and most importantly, painful. Want to know what the problem is? Apparently, Logitech's software does not seem to recognize Forza as a game, and as such, it won't turn off the stiff auto-centering force my wheel has. I won't get into it because this is not a review of Logitech's software, though if it was it would be a thoroughly negative one. Suffice it to say that even if you manage to find the setting to turn this centering spring off, it doesn't actually work. Nothing I try fixes this, and after trying to tough it out for another race or two, I decide this isn't working. I drive almost any game on a wheel now, if possible, but for Forza I'm gonna have to go back to a controller for the health of my shoulders. Okay, in my last review I stuck to a strict chronological order for the footage and the narrative, but we're not going to do that this time. Instead, let's talk about weather using a few random races from various points during my filming. Yes, Forza has weather. Fog, rain, you name it, Forza probably has it. Actually, that's not true. As much as I'd love to have an endurance race in the middle of a hurricane, the developers seem to have forgotten to include this as an option. Anyway, Forza has many weathers, including fog, rain, and rain. If you set up races with random weather, you begin to notice that the way the game chooses weather is annoyingly simple. Rather than choosing weather based on the realistic probability of that weather happening, it just chooses a setting from the list that happens to be full of rain. So half your races will be rainy. Similarly, if you choose variable weather, you're guaranteed to have rain. You see, variable weather is not simply giving the game permission to change the weather. Selecting this setting seems to tell the game that it must change the weather, so every single race with this weather setting will either start or end with rain. I'm not really sure how to criticize this from a game design perspective, not being a game designer, but I will say that it's really not how I was expecting or particularly wanted the weather to work. If it starts raining all of a sudden during one of these variable weather races, you'll want to make a pit stop, otherwise something like this will probably happen to you. This is what a pit stop looks like. You'll also want to take them if you crash your car really hard, like I tend to, or for tires or fuel in a longer race. Forza has a very large car list. I believe it's about 500 strong at launch. Most of these cars can be bought in the fairly self-explanatory Buy Cars menu, and although money doesn't flow in as fast as it did in the one Horizon game I played, prices are also lower. It probably balances out, more or less. There's also a livery editor, which I used to make the car that appears in the original thumbnail for this video, and very likely the current thumbnail too, since for reasons we have yet to get to, I can't go back and take another thumbnail shot right now. There's also a couple minutes of connection issues when I try to open the game one time. Weird. I do plenty of racing during the next week, including an endurance race with that Holden V8 supercar and... Okay, yeah, no more beating around the bush, let's talk upgrades. Motorsport's new upgrade system is the subject of quite a bit of controversy, and understandably so. To me, Forza's always been the sort of game series I see as more of a sandbox. Buy a car, do whatever you feel like to it using the massive reserves of money the game probably throws at you, race your weird Cadillac limo drift car or whatever against your friends. It's a good time. In this 8th Forza Motorsport game, however, they've decided that a sense of progression is more important. Money's a little harder to come by than in Horizon, but that's not the real limiting factor. That would be the new car leveling system. To unlock upgrades, you have to level up your car, which also earns the car points you pay for those upgrades with. But with 500 cars to max out the level on for maximum creativity, that sounds like quite a lot. Let's put it to the test. I've bought this BMW GTE car for the sole purpose of grinding it up to level 50, which is the level cap. There will be no upgrades, no livery making, no fun. I'm just going to drive until I reach max level and see how long the recording is. Ready? Okay, full transparency, I had a very specific music montage planned for this part of the video. Unfortunately, it turns out that music's copyrighted, and I don't think I'll be happy with any other music for this sequence, so enjoy a brief period of awkward silence. Alright, there we go. Level 50. Want to take a guess at how long it took? No? 3 hours, 52 minutes, 52 seconds. That's nearly 4 hours for one of around 500 cars. If you want to max out every single car to give you the chaotic freedom you'd have in previous Forza titles, you're looking at roughly 2,000 hours. 2,000! I have 1,400 hours in my favorite game. Approaching 1,800 in the game I'm most known for. I've owned and played both of these games for years, and you're telling me I'd have to play Forza Motorsport for even longer than that to max out all the cars? That's an insane level of grinding, not to mention that, as with any Forza game, the car list will slowly expand. Yes, most people have no need to have every car's level maxed out, so this is a bit of a flawed argument, but seriously, 4 hours to max out a car is way too much. Put it this way. If a friend asks you if you want to do some multiplayer racing in, say, B-Class, and you don't have a B-Class car, what are you supposed to say? Sure, give me 4 hours? That's ridiculous, and no semi-casual racing game should work this way. But, I hear you say, you don't need to get to level 50 to build a B-Class car. Alright, it's time for another test then. I've bought this 1970 Honda S800 to upgrade from its stock E-Class to A-Class. How hard could it be? In a previous Forza game, this would be a matter of minutes, maybe even less. So I get back to grinding, this time upgrading after every race, just as anyone would when trying to build a car up with this system. The car, of course, starts out very slow, and so does my upgrade progress. It takes me an hour to break out of E-Class. Another 50 minutes to get me to the top of D. I jump from the bottom of C-Class to mid-B 2.5 hours into my build, but it takes me until the 3-hour mark or so before I find myself in the middle of A-Class. But hey, give it another hour so I can unlock engine swaps, and I can build a knockoff version of Superfast Matt's Honda S600. It doesn't seem like Matt's particularly super fast today. I should maybe mention bugs, because there are apparently quite a few of them. Just take a look at this massive list of known issues. For a lot of people, Motorsport is broken to a near game-breaking degree, and that's really not good for a game that costs this much. However, I can only review a game based on my own experience, and the only bug I encountered for the majority of my time filming this review was the voiceover's consistent failure to use the right circuit names.
Some curbs here at Road America have an uneven construction that produces a...
Well, that and one other thing. You'll see. Unfortunately, that last build was only our second of 3 big level-up grinds in this video, because right after I finished building the Honda, an update rolled out to cut level requirements for upgrades in half. You'd think this would solve everything, wouldn't you? To demonstrate that it doesn't, let's do this a third time. Here's a stock Honda S2000. It starts in low C-Class, and I want to upgrade it to S. This is actually a smaller gap than the E to A jump I tried to do with the S800. The problem is, although the unlock levels for upgrades have been drastically lowered, and I do like that, that was never the limiting factor. Want proof? After an hour and 40 minutes of driving, upgrading, and having enormous rollover crashes, I've made it to level 25, which is the new highest unlock level, and the best I can do is low A class. To go any further, I need more car points, and while I didn't record the resulting grind, I'm pretty sure I had to get to level 40 or so anyway before I could turn the S2000 into the wonderful monstrosity it is today. The Honda, which had been a handling build for most of its existence in my garage, now has a very sensible 700 horsepower Lamborghini V10. It's a rocket ship on the straights. Unsurprisingly, it is a lot less impressive in the corners, but it's a pretty fun car to drive, which is why it was the car I drove for the original outro to this video. My original plan was to just narrate my conclusion to the review over this footage, talking about how while the game is very flawed in many ways, I still surprisingly quite enjoyed my time playing it. And indeed, I did. I don't love having to drive on a controller, but it's not Forza's fault that Logitech's software is terrible, and I'm getting used to it anyway. I also hate the grindy upgrade system, but I can at least see where it's coming from, and I'm not entirely opposed to the idea. I just wish it was more like, 20 or 30 minutes to max out a car, not 4 hours. The handling is nice, the cars are numerous, the tracks are decent, although there were only 20 of them at launch. I like the weather, though I wish random and variable weather was implemented differently, and as usual I like the broad strokes of the upgrade system, ignoring the horrible progression, and the user-made liveries and such. Unburdened by the nostalgic memories of Forza Motorsport's past, since I haven't played any, I found myself actually liking this one, apparently the definitive Forza Motorsport since they've dropped the numeral. And that is why I reasoned I'd end this video with footage of me buying the $100 premium edition of Forza Motorsport, accompanied by this super fast map cutaway gag as a fun callback to my S800/S600 build earlier in the video. And so, my initial filming wrapped, I continued playing the game a little for the next few days while procrastinating the writing of this script, and... this thing again. Except this time it's not for a few minutes. You see, at the time of writing this, I'm still locked out of the game I just spent $100 on. Let me show you around my $100 AAA title. This is the new main menu. The first option, Retry, does nothing. The second option, Free Play Online, claims it does something, but then turns out to loop back to the first error screen again. And that's it. That's my entire game now. So, after trying a bunch of things to troubleshoot, I opened a ticket with Forza Support. In my ticket, I described in unnecessary detail the issues I was having, including backstory and images. 39 minutes later, I received this.
Hello! Please check out these articles regarding network connectivity.
The first article here is for multiplayer connections, which are not my problem. I also don't have an IPsec error message, and I most definitely can't get any use out of that Steam troubleshooting article since I have the Microsoft Store version of the game. I correctly selected this in the drop-down menus while creating the ticket, they just ignored it.
Network conditions can affect or cause the following issues, so please try the troubleshooting on the articles and see if it resolves your issue. Save taking a long time to sync. issues connecting to online events or races, disconnecting from online events or races, game error messages without network connectivity, IPsec error messages, DNS error messages, and Horizon Life error messages.
Only one of these is my actual issue, and it's certainly not that last one since this is Forza Motorsport, not Forza Horizon.
Thanks. Thank you, Forza Support and Safety Team.
So, yeah, all in all, it's a cookie-cutter automated response that doesn't even address the right game, let alone the problem I have. I told them as much, as well as mentioning that my most recent troubleshooting idea, reinstalling the entire game, had not worked. And guess what took them over 3 hours to send back?
Hello, the Forza Support and Safety Team assists with in-game issues. If you are encountering an in-game Forza issue, please submit a new ticket with the appropriate ticket form for the issue.
I am indeed encountering an in-game Forza issue, which you should know because I told you in extreme and unnecessary detail 7 hours ago.
If you're experiencing any issues noted below, or something similar, please contact official Xbox support or Steam support based on which platform you are playing on. Unfortunately, we are unable to assist the issues that are not related to our games. You should contact Xbox, Microsoft, or Steam support regarding the following issues.
After allowing myself time to have a little rage fit at this apparently nonsensical response, I did figure out what was going on. Whatever automated system Forza Support uses thinks my response is an unrelated second support question, and it's telling me to submit a new ticket. Given that it would be the same as this ticket, it would get the same useless automated response. At this point, it had been well over half a day, closer to a full day actually, since I was last able to play the game, and so, with no help from Forza Support and no apparent server outages to cause this, I decided I'd better refund the game while I still had the chance. Except, wait a second. That's right. I can't. Thanks, Microsoft Store. I'll let you in on a little secret. A day or two before I bought the game, I got my first ever paycheck from YouTube. I finally hit the payment threshold the past 3.5 years of my channel have been building towards. It was a genuinely really cathartic moment. Now, if nothing else, I'd made $103 in this business. And that's how I justified buying Forza Motorsport's Premium Edition for $100. I was treating myself with that hard-earned YouTube paycheck. But 2 days later, the game simply stopped working, and with no fix in sight and no option to return it, the first and quite possibly only money I'll ever make from YouTube, which has been a big part of my life for the last third of a decade, is just gone. Vanished into the ether. Nothing at all to show for it other than this stupid connection failed screen, because even Forza's single player is online only. As of recording this outro, it's been 7 days and it still won't let me back in. I am still out $100 for my broken game. My current plan is to wait for the mid-November update that will hopefully solve a lot of the known issues. If that doesn't fix my game, I'm going to Microsoft or Xbox support, and I'll try to get that refund manually reviewed if I can. So, in conclusion, I liked Forza Motorsport, and I was fully prepared to slightly reluctantly recommend it, but at the last moment, Forza has snatched a negative review from the jaws of a positive one. I cannot recommend a game that I cannot play, which seems to have pretty much just stolen $100 from me thanks to Microsoft Store's refund policy. Don't let it steal your money too. Don't buy Forza Motorsport. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.